Hey there guys, this is Slamzeron, aka YouTube's Tasuke, and as part of my lifelong mission to talk about things that I've either played, or read, or watched, or even eaten, but tonight, or today, or whenever you're watching this, basically I'm going to be reviewing a little game called Ys IX Monstrum Nox. Yeah, this little game. If you didn't already know, it's the 9th Ys game, given the title. Ys the 9th, if you want. This game in particular, from my perspective, given how late I kind of played Ys VIII, because I was waiting. I bought the game, but then, you know, other games were coming out at the time, and I wanted to go ahead and play those. And then also, you know, the whole localization thing, so I'm like, well, I guess I better wait for, you know, the more quote-unquote polished version. And I say that in quotes because of how I generally feel about that script. But if you want to know what I think about that game, I guess I can have a link in the description to that review. I don't usually link previous reviews and other videos. But if you want to watch that one, it's there. I'll have it in the description if you want. But basically, because of all that, this game, to me, seemed to kind of get announced, like, you know, really fast after Ys VIII. I'm like, oh crap, you know, they're already announcing Ys IX, man. I haven't even played Ys VIII yet. But of course, you know, from, you know, the perspective of people who actually played the game when it came out, especially people who played it, you know, in Japanese, because, you know, Ys VIII, in English, it took a little while to come out, whereas this one was actually a bit more of a, it was like 2 years. I've got the Wikipedia page open so I can get the dates, but the first release was for the PlayStation 4 on September 26, 2019, and we didn't get the game in English, or at least for North America, until February 2nd, 2021. That being said, I do want to note that the Switch version is, at least in English, right around the corner. I'm recording this on June 12th, just in time for E3, but the Switch version for North America is going to be coming out July 6th of this year, and then Europe, you know, July 9th, and then July 16th for Australia. And of course, Japan is getting it the latest at September 9th. That's, ooh, wait a minute, that's around the, well, I don't want to go into the other game coming out in September, but that's going to be a interesting month for these two particular games, I think. But anyway, yeah, so that's the Switch version going to be coming out. So it's not like the game is really that old. I know I'm a little late on talking about the game. I finished it roughly a month ago, I think, maybe a few weeks ago. So yeah, gonna talk about the game now. I do have my little notes that I typed up as I went through the game. I've been doing that more, which actually kind of helps organize things. It's a pretty beefy thing of notes, so you'll have to forgive me if this review is still on the longer side, because usually the notes kind of help me at least get to like the 40 minutes to an hour range, but we'll see. So yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So to start off with, I guess speaking of the game systems that it's on, I guess I'll go ahead and say I got the PS4 version. I actually got the collector's edition of the PS4 version, which came with some nice goodies. I've gotten the like special editions of Ys games before, but this was the first time I had actually like had like a real big collector's edition, because I think, at least with X8, I don't think they actually ever did collector's editions. I think they only did like special editions. There might have been one for, I know there was one for Ys VIII, I remember that one, but I didn't get it. This one I did, which came with some pretty cool stuff. I actually did an unboxing video for the my collab channel, the BBS Podcast Boys channel, which I have a link to that as well if you guys want to watch that and see me kind of shimmy for a little bit. But yeah, it's a nice collector's edition. Doesn't come with everything, and this is another NIS release, and I'll go ahead and say the script is actually really good, but one of my issues here, and I hate to kind of bring this up this early on, but there were some DLC issues I seem to kind of have with the game, because I pre-ordered the game and I was hoping I would get some cool DLC, and I don't know, maybe people are maybe saying that like when the Switch version comes out, they'll include this DLC to purchase, but there was a digital pre-order DLC bonus, which I believe is just one costume for one character. I don't remember exactly, but I've seen the costume and it actually looks really nice. It happens to be for my waifu in this game, so it's like, okay, y'all are going to be gimping me on this fucking costume that I want, and I can't get it, but it's alright. Because it was a digital pre-order bonus, it's like, well, you know, it's one of those things to where it's like, okay, I could get it this way, but like, I'd be getting a version of the game that I'm not really into. I'm a physical collector. Y'all have probably noticed that by now. I tend to kind of like my physical games. So just a slide beef, it's like, it's not really that big a deal. To be quite honest, the costumes are still kind of lackluster. I'll go ahead and say that, you know, the ones that are in the game, because they do have costume DLC, which they're kind of okay. They're sort of like carnival themed. Hawks looks pretty cool. Adol's looks okay. But for the regular costumes of the game, it's basically just the palette swaps. And Adol in particular, I remember someone on Facebook saying he looks like a Fire Emblem character, and I got it. I'm like, okay, yeah, he does. He looks like another alternative Marth, you know, from Fire Emblem. I mean, he looks cool, and given the aesthetic of what he has to do with his hair, hint, hint, it kind of fits a little bit. But overall, costumes still not really there yet, and no classic silver armor costume either. I'm kind of hoping that when the PC version drops, I'm kind of hoping that someone makes a mod to where, like, I don't know, maybe Adol's regular form is like that blue shirt one that he wears in Ys I that was DLC for Ys VIII, and then like his Monstrum form, his Crimson King form, if you will, is his silver armor. That would actually be really cool. Would be really cool if they did that. Maybe did other stuff. It'll be interesting to see kind of what people do with the mods. But yeah, so I got the PS4 version. It looked really good. I saw the trailer for the Switch version. It definitely looks a little, like just a hair graphically more toned down. But like, given what kind of game this is, that's not really that big a deal. It looks fine. But yeah, that's all I have to say about the release and the DLC. So I guess we'll actually get to the real meat of this review, which, you know, usually I start with the story. So the story is broken up into chapters, 9 chapters in total. I think technically 10 if you include the prologue. But yeah, basically it starts off as so. The very first scene jumps right into the whole Balduq prison thing. Basically, it shows Adol try to escape this prison in Balduq, and he gets to like a certain point, but then he sees this girl wearing like a black cloak, a black hood over her head with like a little black feather thing, and she's got a gun, and she shoots some sort of like little weird-looking bullet at Adol, and he's brought to his knees, and he's like, "What are you doing to me? Ugh!" You have a choice of saying, like, I forget what the choices are. But this basically turns him into his new form, and his weapon changes as well. And he gets into, like, this sort of, like, gothic, sort of, like, red and black sort of look that he keeps. It basically is monster form. I'm trying to kind of explain it as if, like, you know, you've never played this game before, when I'm pretty sure there are people who are going to watch it and be like, oh, I want to hear what he thinks, or I'm thinking about getting this game. But yeah, it's, for all intents and purposes, to keep things simple without spoon-feeding too much, this is his so-called monstrum form, because he's been turned to something called a monstrum. And he's been given the monstrum name of Crimson King, which that's going to come into play later on in multiple ways. So then at that point, the game basically turns into like the little tutorial. You get to fight a little boss and whatnot. And then Adol, he gets, you know, surrounded by some soldiers, but he also happens to be near like this little platform thing he can jump into water. And what does he do? He fucking jumps. He jumps, and they're all like, it leads into the city, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, so he's gone now. He jumped away. He's escaped from this little group here, which then brings us to flashback time. Adol and Dogi arrive in the prison city of Balduq, And there's this big line. He's like, and Doug's like, "Oh, what's going on, Adol?" You know. I do also want to note that it's still Patrick Seitz and Bryce Papenbrook doing Dogi and Adol, so that's great. I honestly feel like as far as Dogi goes, there's no other actor that I would want to hear besides Patrick Seitz. Like, if they ever have to recast him, it's going to be very, very, very hard to get used to whatever new voice direction they go with. But basically, they go over there, and then they get stopped by the prison warden, this old guy named Berger, and he's like questioning Adol, and he's like, I'm gonna friggin' arrest you for all the shit you've been doing in the previous Ys games because of all the phenomena that you've been, or phenomenon, I think is the right word. Or no, phenomena, I think, is the plural. Basically, all the crazy stuff that's been going on in the world. And they reference Ys VI a bit. They seem to do a lot of Ys VI stuff. That's not the only Ys game that gets referenced here. One of which, in particular, gets referenced visually. And, well, we'll get to that when we get to. But then, some, like, armored guy with sort of, like, light blue hair and dark skin shows up. And he's like, oh, I'll take over. And he knocks out Adol really quickly, and he's all like, I give you 40 points or whatever. This guy's name, Shadowlard. I think that, yeah, they mentioned his name is Shadowlard. He's like a high-ranking member of these knights called the Hieroglyph Knights. This, like, order of, like, this knight group that's kind of the police force, if you will, of the prison town, or they're one of the sort of like military forces that are in the town currently, because I'm pretty sure Berger and them are part of the Roman Empire, which of course, you know, they follow Adol pretty much all over the place. But and then of course Dogi, I forget what happened. Dogi, I think he gets something happen. I think he gets detained as well. I don't remember exactly what happens, but I know Adol gets knocked out like before him. And so then Adol is taken to Balduq prison. And he's, you know, given a cell, and he's woken up, and, you know, he has to talk to this interrogator chick who looks like Casca from Berserk. I forget her name, but she's very sort of uptight. And it's at this point where I remember them kind of teasing about, they tease this during, like, I think, like, the press of this game, where, like, they talk about how, like, they make references. She name drops a bunch of different locations that he's been to, and she brings up the whole trope about how like, you know, you keep getting all these things, these magical, powerful weapons, but you keep losing them. You know, she brings that up, and like the game's trying to kind of make fun of itself. I also want to kind of bring up one thing as well that I kind of forgot to mention. This game also has save data bonuses. If you have save data of Memories of Celceta and Lacrimosa of Dana, Ys 4 and 8 respectively, you get this like little Dana, like little leafy sort of bracelet thing, and you get some sort of item as well from Celceta, and those are the only equipment you'll see. That's the only like accessory stuff that I used for Adol, just because I thought it was cool. That was like a nice little touch. I thought that was actually really cool. But yeah, so this game does a decent amount of references, which, given sort of the plot so far, it kind of makes sense why they would do that, because, you know, this is right now, as far as the game's concerned, it's almost like kind of like recapping you a little bit on what all Adol has done. The game's going to do that a couple more times, both textually and visually, hint hint. But yeah, other than that, he basically just goes to prison, or back to his cell rather, and he talks to this guy on the other side of his cell, like, you know, different stuff. And there's this scene where, like, in this cafeteria, some thugs are bullying this guy, and you have a choice of what you can do. Just, like, sit and watch, or you can, like, drop your spoon or whatever, and, like, you know, it stops the fight. But it also apparently gave this mysterious guy a chance to slip that very same fork, or a fork, inside Adol's pocket so he can escape. And so he does. He actually makes his escape and gets outside of, you know, the prison, which we had already seen in the tutorial. But yeah, so it's at nighttime, and he pretty much escapes, and he's trying to find a place to go. And he finds this sort of... It's off on, like, it's near the entrance to the city, which is interesting, but it's off on, like, the corner, and it's kind of, like, behind a couple of buildings. But it's like this abandoned 2-floor building that Adol goes into and tries to kind of like, get his bearings a little bit. And he happens to find a red scarf, but also some hair dye. And this was one of the things that, they were talking about in the game as well. Be like, oh, Adol's different, like it's going to make you think like, oh, what happens next? What's he going to do now? And, of course, this big, game changer being that he dyes his hair black. I'm pretty sure, I'd have to look back at the screenshot because I know people who have been listening to the podcast know that there was some sort of like jokes about the actual color of the hair. I'm pretty sure they say black, even though it does look kind of navy or blue. But I'm like, it's like that anime thing, I think, to where it's like, the hair is one color, but then like the accents of it are another color, and because of the color, it actually looks, the way it looks kind of weirdly sort of accented, and it kind of takes over the color of the hair entirely in a way that you may not necessarily expect. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. So let me put it this way. Kind of like how Sango from Inuyasha, her hair looks like it's black because the primary thing is black, but she's got like the brown accents in her hair, so I think she's supposed to have brown hair or whatever. But and it's kind of like that, but again, I think it's meant to be kind of black or at least navy. Probably is to kind of go, the whole red and black thing that seems to kind of go together. But yeah, he basically disguises himself, and that's kind of the look that he has in his human form up until this point. And he kind of chills out, and then he goes out. I'm pretty sure it's during the day, and then suddenly he gets summoned, monstrum form and all, to this battlegrounds-looking place with a bunch of other characters, including a catgirl chick, some priest-looking guy, a chick with a big-ass hammer, and a guy with 2 swords. It's a hammer, like a giant hammer axe thing, and a doll chick, or a chick who is a doll. That's kind of spoilers, but she has a hat and whatnot. And here is where the game introduces the Grimwald thing, which is basically sort of like the raids from Ys VIII, except I'm pretty sure, I don't remember if Ys VIII did this or not, but here, instead of having just your regular party, they throw in all the characters, but I think that's pretty cool. The only real issue I can really think of at the moment, and this wasn't in my notes either, but I just realized it, like, when you do this, obviously you still have, like, you still switch between your 3 characters and whatnot, but what the issue here is that, like, it doesn't seem like from what I remember, only your 3 characters that you have with you level up. Like, your other party members, if you're using them, don't level up. I don't think. I could be proven wrong in the actual footage recording because, again, I record the actual audio of the review before the footage because the audio kind of dictates how long the footage is going to be, and I don't really like recording sort of like a bunch of footage ahead of time. Even though that's probably what I should do. I probably should just be recording a fair amount of it. I know the Elgato has a thing to where it has a flashback recording, but I don't have the hard drive space for that. But anyway, it introduces this thing called the Grimwald, which there's a story reason behind it, but there's also a gameplay thing with it. The gameplay, obviously being like, the raids and whatnot. There are 2 different types. This one that introduces is this thing where you have to protect this crystal called the Sphene, which is a really fucking funny name, and you have to fight these creatures called the Lemures. Or Lemures, I still can't remember how to pronounce them. Think Hellions from Tales of Zestiria, or demons from Tales of Berseria, and that's actually a very, 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 very good comparison. And that's going to make a lot of sense later on. But you basically fight like a giant flurry of these enemies that like come in and come out. Later on in the game, they introduce the ambushes where it's like, an ambush, watch out! And like, there are a couple that come in behind you. As you go through the story, you fight more powerful Lemures that you will encounter in the game. The whole thing, your, what do you call it? What's the right words? Your support team, where like Dogi and your other characters show up and it's like, here, let me give you a hand, and like they do like this like perk thing, like temporary unlimited TP, or what I'm just calling it TP, unlimited energy points to use your skills, or like temporary defense decrease to enemies or whatever. And of course, as you level up your affinity with your party members or your affection or whatever, you get you get cutscenes, which are kind of cool, which I'll go into that later on. But also, like, you get, like, it increases, like, their support thingy. Like, you get, like, let's say, for example, let's stick with Dougie. I don't think this is how it is, but, like, let's say Dougie, like, his first one is, like, 5% damage increase to Lemures. And then, like, when you become more buddy-buddy with him, you get, like, 10, I think. It's actually really easy to become buddy-buddy with all these characters, because it's the gifts thing from Ys VIII, and you get, the cutscenes. I haven't done it with everyone yet, but I know with Hawk, you give him the glasses, and, I'll get to White Cat later on. Like I said, I don't think I told you yet, she's my wifey. But, yeah, so, that's basically sort of this game's raid system. And, like, they introduce another one later on to where instead of, protecting the Fiend, it's more about, like, breaking all these little crystal things, and you have to destroy, like, 200 of them. And, just stuff like that. But like I said, I'm pretty sure only your main party actually gets the real benefit of it, where I feel like if you're going to include everyone in the party anyway, you might as well let it to where they can have a level up as well. Again, I could be entirely wrong, because I don't remember. It's been a while. I usually try to wait until after I've recorded the review and done everything before I actually play the game again. I actually haven't played the game that much besides, playing the game. But now that I finished, I haven't really touched it since. So I'm actually looking forward to playing it to record the footage. But yeah, so you protect the Fiend, and Aprilis is all like sup dogs, and they show this cutscene, and you can tell it's a specific actual like cutscene because at least on my copy of the game or the PS4 version or whatever, like there's some like what do you call it, distortion or artifacting in the footage, because you can kind of tell like this is like a specific clip that was thrown into the game instead of making it real time, which that's kind of funny. Kind of reminded me of Crisis Core back in the day. Another word you can maybe describe as compress. I just realized that as I took a quick pause to kind of catch myself. I had dinner a while ago, so you're going to have to kind of bear with me if I sound a little refluxy and if my audio sounds a little cut up in spaces. I'm going to try to fix it as best in post, but yeah, basically, this is where Aprilis is all like, okay, yeah, I've gathered you all here, and I've turned you all into monstrums, because I need you guys to help me do this thing called the Grimwald Nox, which is basically like, I'm pretty sure it's like every night. I think they make it sound like it's every night. Every night or so, like you get someone to fight these Lemures to protect people, and then you go home. It definitely has a very sort of like, this is the impression I kind of got with it. It felt very like one of those animes to where like, it's the new kid in the school and he joins that club, but like, everyone kind of knows each other, even though they truthfully don't. At least in this sense, they don't. But I kind of had this sense that, like, Adol was, like, straight up the new kid, and everyone kind of knew each other. So, like, you get used to it, this kind of thing. I found that to be kind of funny. And then you go back to regular world of Balduq, and Dougie's like, Adol, what up, dog? They talk a little bit, and they go back to the base, and it's like, all right, I'm going to set this shit up. You go do your thing, and I'll be sure to fix up this place to be a good hiding spot. Which, of course, what he ends up doing is, like, making it look all nice, and they end up hiring a bunch of people to basically run a bar, in which they introduce characters like Shantae, the barkeeper, and Yutha, the waitress. Who else did they introduce at that point? They introduce a couple other characters, I think, early on. I don't remember. Well, let's just say Adol's prison buddy is pretty important. But yeah, he joins up. He's actually very important. But that's more or less the prologue, I believe. So this is, I think it's technically chapter 2, I believe. In my notes, I didn't really differentiate in between Adol or Adol. Adol 1, no, chapter, the prologue in chapter 1. So I'm pretty sure I've got, or I don't know, but anyway, I'm confused. But basically, each chapter going forward is almost like a mystery, because at this point we don't know who the other Monstrum are, and we're also trying to kind of figure out this whole Balduq prison thing and kind of go back and see what that's all about, as well as figure out the Grimwald. I'm pretty sure Adol is thinking like, okay, well, in order to sort of figure out this Grimwald thing, we have to go back to Balduq. Balduq prison, that is. You could say it's almost like Darm Tower in a way, which is interesting. But that's sort of the goal right now. But at any rate, the next chapter leads us on to the White Cat character, who is my waifu. Basically, Adol is going over to he gets some sort of lead about this group called the Pendleton Company, which is a very like financial sort of like market sort of like financial group, and he runs into this like very sort of like, how do you describe her? Like, she's this very sort of like, I almost want to call her a Girl Scout, probably because of her fucking hat, but this really sort of like posh or whatever the right word is, I don't know. She's this really sort of petite looking little, I say little, but she's like 16, but like he meets this chick. He runs into this chick, he's like, I'm sorry. And one issue I do have kind of with the game a little bit is that as far as the identities of the other Monstrum, it's kind of 50-50. Two of them were legitimately surprising, even though one of them I got spoiled the name of. So, and of course, once you actually see it, you know, it's like, okay, that's going to be him. But the other two were pretty easy to point out. Aprilis's identity I did kind of dip into a little bit before the game actually came out, because I was looking up stuff on the wiki, so I kind of figured it out from there. And same with the doll character, so I kind of already knew about them, but I didn't know the full details. But yeah, this little cupcake of a character, Krisha Pendleton, ends up being her name. It's pretty easy to tell, like, yeah, she's the White Cat. There was maybe one teeny tiny instance where I thought it was going to be her sister Carla, just because when you talk to her, she knows you. She knows you're Adol, and she knows that you were supposed to be in the prison because she's actually the person you're looking for. Because Dogi tells you specifically that there's someone who's from the Pendleton Company who's been actually visiting the prison. Which I had to look up a video to remember that, because I can't remember shit. But, yeah, so she basically bargains with you. She'll give you information if you help her find out who's been stealing money from the Pendleton Company. Because when you come in, there's like, her dad and Krisha comes in later on, and all three of them are talking about like, oh, we lost a lot of money. And Krisha was the one who was involved with this money. Do you see where I'm going at here? Yeah, this game is actually, this section's pretty obvious, but yeah, so you end up going to, you agree, I say you, but Adol agrees, and he ends up going to like sort of the poor section of the, of Balduq, and you go over there, and you happen to see the White Cat jumping around on this little giant podium thingy, or not podium, but like this building that she can like be on top of, and she like is throwing money. She's throwing money to everyone, like, oh, money, money, money. And she's doing this, we learn, because she wants to help them out. Because you end up chasing her down, and you catch her, and it's revealed that, yep, it's Krisha. And so you talk to her and stuff, and you actually learn when you go back there that all it's really doing is just making them lazy and not want to work, and be like, oh, the White Cat will give us more money. Let's just drink all day. Glug, glug, glug. And then she decides, well, I need to kind of tighten myself up a little bit. And it's kind of funny comparing the two personalities of the White Cat and Krisha, because when you first meet the White Cat, she's very kind of sure of herself. She talks in a very sort of like typical tomboy anime girl voice. I say tomboy, but, you know, like, you know, main character, high school girl, you know, who knows how to do karate, you know. But Krisha, you know, I did kind of like she has this very teeny touch, like, you know, one of my favorite lines, he's like, ooh, a treasure chest. I can't do it properly, but, you know, she has like this very sort of like girly, sort of soft rabbit voice, and it's precious. She is precious. I must protect her. She's also, speaking of protecting, she's the punchy person of this game, which I'm glad we actually have a fist fighter in this game, because we missed out on that on Ys VIII. In terms of sort of the role she plays, she's less of a Sahad or Dogi and more of a Laxia or Aisha, and that she's sort of like Adol's main squeeze, and that definitely comes into play near the end, especially during her special friendship cutscene. But yeah, so you help her sort of basically turn herself in or whatever. Carla, I think, also knew from what I remember. It's one of those things. I don't really remember too much about this section. I didn't even really write that much. I just mainly wrote like, oh, it turns out I wrote like the twist. I didn't actually write down the actual regular meat of the story. So I haven't even told you about Cloaca Maxia yet, which is the dungeon they go to, where because what Adol's trying to do as far as Balduq prison goes, he's trying to figure out how to get into the prison without getting caught, and a lot of this game's entrances are like different like side entrances, and it just kind of furthers the lore and the plot. They're like, okay, well, Balduq prison, there are about a million different places you can go in and out of, and they go through the first dungeon, which I believe was also the dungeon in the demo, called Cloaca Maxima or Maxia or something. It's basically the shithole of the whole city, hence the term cloaca. I'll go ahead and say this now, and I know that's like one of my favorite things to say in my reviews, but and like I said before, this game was published and localized in English by NIS America. They did a phenomenal job with this script. Like, this was a really good script. Like, because even after the retranslation and relocalization of Ys VIII, I did kind of feel like that there wasn't too much personality in like a lot of the characters besides Sahad and like a handful of others. Here, everyone's got a little bit of personality. They all kind of, there's a lot of like sayings and idioms and whatnot, but at the same time, like, everyone's really stylized. You know, characters talk in a really interesting way. You know, every character is really fun to listen to, and the story, because of that, was a lot more engaging, and I was much more interested in the characters than I was in 8. So I honestly feel like they did a great job here. So NIS, great job. This was a very good script. And the voice acting was good as well. Like, this was great. Like, honestly, I would trust them with the remaining Ys games. I was kind of an Xseed purist for a while. I know that's kind of weird given kind of the drama with that as well. But I feel like NIS, you've earned my respect. No, you've had my respect. But here, definitely the script was very, very good. So they go through and they get to a certain part of the prison. They're not able to stay for very long, and I think they see another prisoner there or something. But they kind of do some like reconnaissance and stuff, and they have to kind of go back. Going into the prison is actually a very recurring thing, because, you know, the game, you know, has side quests. At this point, I'm pretty sure they introduced side quests that you can do, and with these, even though they're side quests, it's kind of funny because for some of them, and they say, like, you know, missing out on the side quest doesn't have any effect on the story, yet, like, a lot of times, especially later on, they do a lot of really strong character moments. Like, there's one with this one character that I'll talk about later on, with a guy named Maxim, that's pretty interesting. But then also, like, you get other characters through doing the side quests and going to the prison and rescuing people, including your buddy, whose name is Parks, who's looking for another buddy, which is, well, there's a lot of stuff going on in this prison here, and a lot to unpack. But yeah, so and also, you know, another mechanic they introduced, and this is actually kind of a cool thing, I think, especially when you're in the city and you don't really have much of a chance to explore outside the city. That doesn't even really come into play until later on, but there are these little tiny portal things where you go up to it and like Lemiris pop out, and the entire world kind of freezes up, and you have to fight you fight the Lemiris, and it brings up like this Nox counter that when it gets to like 100 or whatever, it opens up a Grimwald Nox, and there's also a Grimwald Eos, which is like a tinier one, which all it really does is just sort of open up a different section of the map. That's almost more of like for the map completionists out there, because this game also does do like the sort of like cartography thing where like, you know, you plan out the map. There's no like story reason behind it, but you do have a guy that you can talk to and be like, hey, show me your map. Oh, you made this much progress. Here, have a potion or whatever. Which is that's kind of nice. I do kind of like that aspect of the Ys games, or at least the newer ones where you can explore and whatnot. Although, even though you're kind of confined to a city, but even then, like, because when you get Krisha in particular, and once I go through like the plot twists, I'm going to refer to them by their regular name, because they don't even really refer to her as White Cat that much. It's only when they're in their monstrum forms and they're talking to people who don't know their identities, they'll refer to each other as their code name. So like, you know, right now the Crimson King, and then White Cat for Adol and Krisha. But Adol has this one thing he can do called the Crimson Line, where he basically latches on to something and he can kind of fly all over the place. And Krisha has this thing, I think it's called like Heavenly Steps. That's either the name of one of her moves, or it's the name of her like special ability where she can walk on walls, which brings me to talk about how the platforming in this game, because I always identified the Ys series, at least the modern Ys games, as a platforming RPG. This game really does a lot well with sort of like the verticality of the games. There's one section later on where you have to like jump around, you glide across when you get a certain character's ability, and here you have to like run up walls and stuff. And of course, with Adol's Crimson Line, you can like hop around buildings. Like, it's honestly really fun to just kind of fly around. It's almost like a Spider-Man game, if you can even sort of, not entirely, not that much verticality, but it's definitely there. And even when you go out into the field, there's a little bit of verticality. Like, and there are a lot of jumping, which, you know, y'all know I like my jumping. But I feel like this game really improved on Ys VIII's verticality, and I feel like because of that, this is by default a stronger game. And I will go ahead and say that I do kind of like Ys IX more than 8. I think Ys VIII had a more interesting setting and kind of more interesting plot, and quite honestly, a bigger plot. But Ys IX kind of plays a little bit more with the mystery thing that Ys VIII kind of did for like one character, even if most of the mystery is not that hard to figure out. But also, just the general gameplay, I feel like, has improved. Like, this game really improved on a lot of the things that I wanted Ys VIII to do. So, definitely up there. But, yeah, you do all that stuff. You tackle the Grimwald, and you go into the prison. But then the game shifts perspective, and it goes back to the prison, and you're thinking, what's this? And you see a character who looks kind of familiar. And you see, it's Adol? There are 2 Adol Christians? And this one has red hair? And he has on some grungy looking cloak thing? What the F is going on? And here he just kind of explores a little bit. Like, this, he's able to sneak out. And like, it's kind of funny, the guard lets him, like, hey, I'll just let you explore. Of course, this guard ends up being actually like a contact between the outside world and Balduq through that Maxim character that I mentioned, who's sort of like the shady, like, black market guy with a hawk, who's actually really important. But, so, it's kind of funny how, like, it's really funny how tight the security of Balduq is, but also how loose it can be, especially when a certain section is discovered. But, yeah, that's basically what happens. So, yeah, like I said, you take one look at Krisha, and it's like, okay, yeah, you're an important character. Like, that's one, I guess, issue, quote unquote, with the design. And even when you take a look, even after you, really only one character legitimately looks like an NPC, and we're not at him yet. And even the next character, when they reveal it, it's all like, oh, that's interesting. But then, like, when you actually see him, it's like, okay, yeah, this is like his his like regular. He looks like he was designed specifically. He doesn't look like that they handed it off to like their NPC guys. Like, okay, I'll just make some regular dude who doesn't even look that interesting. Like, no, this character legit looks like someone who stands out, and that's probably one issue. And maybe that's kind of part of the fun of the mystery. Like, it's like, oh, that character looks kind of interesting. Maybe they might be a monstrum. But funnily enough, like, you know, one character. The character who I think was probably the most surprising, I first saw him in a side quest. And those who have played the game will probably be able to know what I'm talking about, what I explained, but it's a Peeping Tom side quest with a what's the word? In like a hot spring area that you have to kind of figure out like where people can like are able to peep in. And that's where I actually saw this final member of the Monstrum that I hadn't met yet, and I didn't even think of it. I thought they were just some random ass dude, and like, okay, interesting. Once I got to his store, I started to kind of put the pieces together, but again, like, he was probably the most interesting, besides this one, because then we get to the next chapter with Hawk, the character Hawk. At this point, Krisha becomes Adol's buddy, Loki becomes Adol's voice, and they're kind of hanging out. She's sort of showing him around the market district, and stuff. And you know, they do the whole thing with the Grimwald. And then this one, I don't really think there was much. I think at this point they're just kind of Krisha's just kind of running errands or whatever. I don't remember this beginning part being that important, I guess, or interesting. But then when you get to the Grimwald, Hawk shows up and he's like, "Bro, Adol, I want to fight you. Let's fight." And of course, our brother's like, fighting between monstrums is forbidden for a while. You do the Monstrum Grimwald battle thingy. I think at this one is the one where they introduce the one where you have to destroy all the crystals, and you know, it's not really that difficult. It's actually pretty easy because you can use the Crimson Line to kind of go through them as well. And some of them take more hits. You know, and then when you destroy enough of them, the big boss monster comes out, and if you destroy that monster, it destroys all the other little crystal things that you have to destroy. So that's one way to sort of make things kind of easy. But basically, after this, Hawk is all like, "Hey, dogs, I know a secret way to the prison." And Adol and Krisha is like, "Okay, dog, we'll follow you." And they go through this like little place, like another dungeon or whatever. It ends up leading them to the Hieroglyph Knights Charter House, where Shadowlord is there. And Hawk is all like, "Yo, dog, I want to fight your ass." And Shadowlord's all like, "I give you 0 points," or whatever. And Hawk tries to fight him, but he ends up getting knocked out. And he gets knocked out of his monstrum form, revealing him as Kratos, who is actually a member of the Hieroglyph Knights. Some purple-haired looking dude, member of the Hieroglyph Knights, and they find some way to sort of figure him out while he's nursing back to health. They end up going to, like, I think the church area, and that's where they learned that he was actually an orphan who was actually like a prodigy. He was incredibly smart, and he was really good at everything, but he didn't really care much about anything. And then these bandits came in, and they attacked the orphanage, and they killed his like crush, and it made him really mad. And he sought out and like he killed the bandits himself, and he just goes around fighting and killing people now. And at this point, we don't really know why. But like I said, Hawk was probably one of two of the monstrums that I found to be entirely surprising. Like, oh, I wasn't even expecting this. I don't know if it was just because maybe I'm just blind. He actually was there the entire time in like the corner, and like, oh, I didn't even recognize this guy, or whatever. But like, I was legitimately like, oh, that's interesting. Of course, even if he did show up before this scene in his regular form, it probably would have just been like his regular clothes and not his armor. So that's kind of my I don't know. I'd have to maybe replay that section of the game where they would maybe show, because they do show one of the monstrums in their human form, and I'm just like, oh, okay. And that's another instance where it's like I took a look at that one card. I was like, okay, yeah, she's definitely a monstrum. Like Krisha and this other chick were probably the obvious ones. Then Kratos and then one other character were not obvious. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. I don't even think they don't even go to the prison. I don't think. I think the charter house does eventually lead to the prison. There's a lot of like we're getting closer to what we're looking for, and they find like a lot of smaller information. Like they figure out that Balduq prison was actually sort of like a war fortress, and that's the reason why it has all these like different traps and whatnot and all that shit. Just like little things here and there, Kratos does, and I do want to mention this real quick. He does kind of shoot down the notion that he kind of liked this person, this orphan chick. Knowing what I know of him now, that's definitely a bit more true. But again, there's a bit more to it. I think it's kind of like one of the things where like, yeah, he does kind of like this person, but also at the same time, there's a bit more than that. But yeah, this one is these chapters, these first few chapters are definitely along with exploring the and trying to figure out the whole Balduq and Grimwald thing. It's a very character driven story where you get to kind of learn these characters a little bit, and they kind of give you like the basic sort of outlook on who they are and why they are doing what they're doing, which then brings us to the next chapter, this one being for the doll, the character literally named Doll. She's story-wise, she's a pretty interesting character, and also gameplay-wise, because they're doing the whole thing where it's like the slash, pierce, and smash type. This chick here, she is the only other slash type. So I guess you could say she's kind of like Geis or Donna from the previous games. In this situation, she is more like Donna in that she uses a sword-like weapon, but it's a different kind of thing. She has like sort of like this like sword chain thing, like she's Ivy from Soul Calibur or whatever. But it's pretty cool. And I also want to before I move on from Credo, you get his like ability to fly. He gets like this little black wings thing, so you can glide around. That's what I was mentioning before with the gliding thing. And here with the doll character, you get like this ability where like I think it's on the PS4. It's like you touch the touchpad, and the game goes like monochrome, and you can kind of see through walls, and you can see like enemies from through walls, and you can see treasure chests and secret passages and secret switches and whatnot. And that's a lot of these dungeons have like Krisha's the Cloaca Maxima or Maxia or whatever. There's a lot of like the running up walls thing. With Kratos, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of gliding from what I remember. And here, it's like literally like a basic ass dungeon, but there are a lot of like doors that don't have like any ways to open it. But if you do like the little doll eye things, you can see like a hidden switch somewhere. So there's a lot of that. But basically, the story in this chapter is that there are some thieves who dressed up as the Monstrums, and they stole some stuff from this shop that also happens to house a doll. That they show pretty early on that the doll. You probably already guessed by the use of the word doll. There's a lot of keywords here. Anemona is her name. Turns out she is a doll brought to life and became a monstrum that way. And she doesn't have her memories, and she's trying to kind of she leaves the shop at night to kind of figure things out. And one of the things that the thieves stole was a statue of this historical famous figure in Balduq history known as Saint Rosvita that Anemona really seems to like. And she's able to get the statue back. Obviously, it leads them to through a dungeon, and then also to Balduq prison. I almost want to say Balduq castle, but like no, it's a prison. The monster. I remember the scene in particular. Like the fake monstrums trick Adol and the gang into going inside a prison. That's the word I'm looking for. A prison cell. And it's like, oh, we tricked you. And it's kind of funny how, like, Krisha, she, like, lowers her head and lowers her eyes. It's like, shame. Whereas Hawkeye, like, looks off to the side and it cuts and it shows, like, okay, there are these monsters who are actually, like, about to attack them. And they find a way to get the statue back. And I think it actually leads them to a... They come up a couple of times. It might be either in another chapter or during this chapter, but they end up going to like this abandoned village area, and I think it led them to like a spider cave of sorts. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember seeing these guys again, and they end up getting, I want to say dropped off. I don't think they're killed, but I don't recall seeing them that often after at least this chapter and maybe one more. I might be mixing up the chapters a little bit, but yeah, that's hers basically. She's trying to kind of figure out her memories, and she gets little glimpses of it. She's actually a very kind of important monstrum, both in what kind of monstrum she is as well as what she came from. Hint hint. I guess you could say she was also a bit of a surprise. This is one that I kind of ended up looking up a little bit, so I kind of already knew. And she was, when I was looking at the promotional material when the game was being announced and like they were showing trailers and whatnot, this character in particular kind of looked, she looks a little similar to Aprilis, and I think that's deliberate, especially given what I know about them now. But yeah, so, and of course all this time as well they're showing, I probably should have mentioned this before, it keeps switching back to the other Adol in the prison. And it's also around this time where they reveal that whole, like, you know, connection to Balduq prison, to the outside world that I mentioned before, who happens to be the guard in front of a prison Adol's cell. So it turns out he's kind of acting as sort of like an in-between with the help of the character Maxim. That's kind of how they figure stuff out. And this Adol is using his cartography abilities to map out, you know, the prison and stuff. But so yeah, it keeps kind of flipping, and we're learning a little bit more about the prison. Like it's around here also where they start to show more of like the actual like fortress side of things. But yeah, so the next chapter is involving the Raging Bull, who this was another one of the ones where it was like, yeah, it was pretty obvious going in. It's Yufa. The waitress chick Yufa is the Raging Bull. You can look at them and you can tell, like, and even then, like I said before, like Krisha, she looks like a interesting character. So by the rules of this kind of thing, interesting character design equals important character, you know, at least in some instance, you know. But yeah, it turns out Yufa is the Raging Bull. She's dating this, or Yufa rather, because we don't learn that she's the Raging Bull until like during the climax of this chapter, or I say climax, but like, you know, the heat of this chapter. Yufa ends up is Loki dating this bull rider guy named Felix, and they go to the Coliseum to see one of his shows, and Felix is doing his bull thing, but the bull gets spooked during the show and starts going gets kind of nervous, and when the bull's like about to hurt Felix, like Yufa comes in, like sweeps and like saves the day and like reveals her monstrum form. So, and they're trying to kind of figure out what exactly happened and where the noises come from. They determine that the noise is actually underneath the Coliseum, so they go underneath the Coliseum through like this little passage that you break down. That's sort of her ability. She breaks stuff. You charge the attack button, and it like you hit. And then you hit something and it breaks, usually like a wall or like a crystal or something. Yeah, so they're going underneath the Coliseum to figure out what noise, because they determine that it's like a roar, some sort of a creature noise that scares the bull. And they go down there, and it leads them back into the prison, where they fight a crystallized primordial from Ys VIII. The little dinosaur guy. Nani? I even have Nani in all caps with a question mark in parentheses in my notes. It's like, what's going on here? Something's going on with the prison. Because they're already... I didn't mention this, but this game kind of, I think, brings it up pretty early on. That, like, people are getting arrested left and right. and being kept there for a long time, and no one's really escaped the prison, and there's a lot about the prison they don't know, no one knows, except for like a handful of people. By that I mean Shadowlord and Aprilis, actually. But she deliberately, and Hog is sort of like, hey, you're not telling us everything, tell us everything. In time, I will tell you, that kind of thing. But, yeah, this was a pretty interesting surprise, and it's around here where it seems like there's some very strange things going on in this this prison. Honestly, it kind of, this is probably one issue with the storyline, I think, is that it seems like there are two different plots going on. The Grimwald and then also Balduq. There are two different sort of like, and I feel like they don't really connect. They connect kind of loosely when the main bad guy shows up, but it's more of like I was doing all this and this, and it's like, okay, well, they're connected in that, well, I don't want to say too much because we're not really there yet, but anyway, like I said, the Raging Bull's identity was fairly obvious. I would say this one was maybe even more obvious than Kreesha, because like I said, there was I slightly suspected it might have been Carla at one point, but Kreesha, it's like, once I saw her, I'm like, okay, it's either her or Carla, and it's like, and then of course it ended up being Kreesha, which I'm glad because I like Kreesha better. But yeah, Yutha being the Raging Bull, that was pretty dang obvious. I would say that's probably the most obvious out of all of them. And I believe it's around this section when you get to the, or this chapter rather, where you get to the prison Adol section, where it's here you find a section of the prison that, and I'll bring up the music real quick because the music's just as good as the other Ys games. It's maybe not as memorable as some of the other ones. It's a lot more harder music here, like more guitars and more like almost metal sounding music. But there's some good tracks here. Once you actually get to it, the field music's pretty good, and I really like the Coliseum music they play when you're in that area. And the music in this particular part of the story, it sounds fancy, but it sounds very sort of like, to me, it sounds like sort of, why are we playing this kind of music in this setting kind of thing, to me. Because Prison Adol finds a very sophisticated sort of like open part of the prison that has a bunch of political people, very powerful and very rich people that they actually chose to go to themselves. They paid to get into this particular part of the prison, where you get food and you can buy clothes and you can do all these different things. You can talk to people. You can traverse the prison a little bit to your leisure, and you can also work in a mine if you want to work. So it's this weird, like, sort of not prison to where it's like it's a prison, or it's a very strange situation. And there's also a church that you can go to, which is sort of like the main meeting place where Adol meets this guy named Marius, who he's sort of like this weird like contact in this particular area. Adol's not really a part of this group yet. Prison Adol, I mean. Of course, it. Those who know the story understand why I'm calling him just Adol, but so he ends up helping Prison Adol with some stuff, getting him a pass so that he can be part of this, like, elite group of prisoners, and help them kind of figure out more, like, how to escape and stuff. Because this guy has connections, which is a little strange. But, yeah, it's at this point, with the Prison Adol stuff, it's him going back to this place and them trying to kind of plan to escape and shit and try to kind of figure things out. This Marius character is also, lore-wise, actually a very important character. And 50-50, which is, I mean, there's a lot. We're not even there yet. But, oh, sorry, that one peaked. Or that might not, because I tend to do like my little leveling thing. We'll see. I'm gonna have to really kind of play around with this recording. But yeah, Marius, not who he seems. Next we get to the next chapter. I think this is chapter 6 at this point. Renegade. That's the name of the other monstrum. This one was the other surprise, mainly given what this character's regular form looks like, which is kind of interesting. It's here we learn that the Renegade is actually a kid in a wheelchair named Jules. His name I got spoiled on Facebook, but because I was talking about the game a little bit, or someone was talking about the game, and I made a thread be like, who's your favorite monstrum? Mine's the white cat. And then someone said, I like Jules. And like, who's Jules? Oh, okay, thanks for spoiling. But his identity was kind of surprising, because he looks like an NPC, like a slightly stylized NPC. And he also only really appeared once during the Peeping Tom. From what I remember, the Peeping Tom side mission. But he was diagnosed with a disease that's weakened him and made him unable to walk, and he thinks he's probably going to die soon, and he likes to study old ruins, and he has like this bucket list called Nails in the Coffin. It's funny, like during the Grimwald, once they figure out who he is, Krisha and Yufa are like, are you okay? It's like, I'm fine. Like, they're concerned. And of course he's all like, I can handle my own, treat me like I'm normal, and all that shit. I might be getting the sort of the things kind of messed up, but because it's either in chapter 6 or 7 where Aprilis does talk about the Grimwalds a little bit more, where she basically talks about how I'll go ahead and say this because again I don't remember where in the story this. Actually, I had to look through my screenshots in the game to remember this particular part because I wanted to make sure I had all the information. I've been having to do like a lot of like checking back of like, okay, so this happened here, this happened here, this happened here. It's like, but yeah. So at any rate, during one of the Grimwalds, Aprilis reveals that the Grimwald Nox was actually created by a god by the name of Grimnir, which he used, or she or whatever, to try and get rid of all the evil energy that has been coming up. Humans' negative feelings like hatred and greed and sorrow and all that creates a thing called enmity, which is basically like, malevolence from Zestiria and Berseria. You see where I'm going here? And that evil energy creates the Lemures. And so warriors were needed to kill those monsters. And originally it was demigods, but then there's more to it than that. That Aprilis is all. This is sort of where Aprilis is all like, I'll tell you more once you find the truth of the prison. So, but they are able to find an entrance to the prison through a ruin. So obviously, Jules is all like, I want to go there, dog. It's like, okay, cool. And it's kind of funny when like he's in town, he still kind of takes his monstrum form, but he wears it. He kind of like dresses down a little bit. So it's just sort of like he's able. I kept thinking like, how are they going to handle this when he's in his when he's not out fighting? Because obviously when you're out in the field or in a battle or in dungeon, like he's just regular monstrum form with like his staff and all that, where he kind of can like roll around and shit. But then like when he's in the city, he still takes his monstrum form, but he wears a different outfit, so like he can still roll around and stuff. But it would be kind of funny if like he was in his wheelchair and you could roll around in the wheelchair, like he just literally tumbles. That'd be funny. Because in this game, not only can you jump, but you can also roll. And his ability, his like monstrum ability, is like called Shadow Dive, where you like go underneath the ground and like a little shadow. And you can kind of go through like little tiny areas, and you can like do different things, and it's pretty cool. His dungeon involved a lot of like little sewer areas. We had to go through like little tiny areas. There's this one section where you have to kind of go around a giant enemy that you can't kill. Yeah, they make it to the prison where they find Jules's dad or whatever is actually working with Shadowlord. And that's where they're all like, Dad, what the F is going on? You went missing and stuff, because his dad went missing. I'm kind of filling in information as I go because I don't plan these reviews, even though I have notes. Yeah, this is where things get a little interesting. A little interesting. Because while Shadowlord is also there, Aprilis shows up. And they try to fight each other, but Aprilis is stabbed by Shadowlord, so she's presumed killed. And Adol holds her. You have a dialogue show, and he's like, "Stay with me, Aprilis." I forget what I said. Like, "No, you can't die." This game has like Adol choices. When they are choices for Adol, but like they're dialogue choices. Since Adol's trying to hide his identity, there are a few where it's like, "I'm not Adol," or "I don't know what you're talking about." And there were a couple times where I picked that to kind of be funny or whatever. I kind of played Adol to where like he's partially serious but partial funny, kind of like a weird neutral thing. But there'd be some one where I was like, "Don't be dumb," and that was sort of the. There was like I think like a couple. There was a couple. Kind of like the whole Ys VIII issue with Kiergaard, where the game was making fun of me for my decisions. Like, "Tell me about Altago. You can maybe ask him about Altago after we figure it out." And I'm all like, "I was onto something because I've played that game before and I know how hard it is to get to Altago." I'm still a little butthurt about that. But here, the game was relatively nice to me. I don't remember. There was like one instance where I think Creature was like, "No, dog." But most of the time, whenever I would say something that was either quote-unquote wrong or sort of like random, the game was all like, "Don't play dumb," or "Come on, man." Like it was sort of small. Like the game wasn't really making fun of me like Ys VIII was, and so I appreciate that. But yeah. So, but that also kind of, well, again, we're not there yet. But yeah. So at this point, Adol, he looks at Shadow and he's looking all angry, but then suddenly he gets sick. And he passes out, and the gang has to retreat carrying him out. And so they go home. So this is sort of where things start to get even more interesting, because one, the primordial, two, the part of the prison where there are people just kind of basically chilling, and then also this, where Aprilis has been killed, and so the gang is kind of operating this Grimwald thing kind of mindlessly at this point. It's around this part, I believe, also where Adol and Marius, or Prison Adol and Marius, they decide to leave the prison through some old mines. And it's kind of funny how they're trying to kind of get back to the prison to kind of figure things out, and they find another entrance through like this volcano and like mineshaft thing. So they introduce this like short-lived mechanic where you get to a part where you can't progress. Like, let's take a look around. Then there's like this little thing that you go to. There's like this little dial thing where you step on it, and now it's like, I feel something familiar, and then you switch to the other Adol, and then you kind of, it's like this weird sort of like little puzzle thing. The only way I can think of to describe it is sort of like one kind of like helping each other out, but then also there's this one part where like Prison Adol section, you get to like this monster that you can't fight on your own because Prison Adol just has like this broken sword as his weapon. And so what they do is they trick the monster into falling through like a broken floor or whatever, and then you go down there, or it goes down there, and it happens to be where Crimson King and all of them, or like player Adol, whatever, Monstrum Adol, are there, and they go and they fight and shit. So it's pretty short-lived, but it was kind of interesting, and also a slight hint as to what's actually going on between the two Adols. But basically, the two Prison Adol and Marius escape, and Prison Adol is actually about to get to the bar, which is known as the Dandelion. I don't think I ever mentioned that, but they call it the Dandelion. And as well as meeting up with that same Inspector chick, who we actually learn at this point, particularly during Jules' his chapter, is that she is performing some sort of paranormal investigation. She's pretty easily scared. Ingrid, that's her name. Her name's Ingrid. I couldn't remember her name. It's kind of funny. That's sort of like a separate kind of like thing altogether. Like even through all this, she's still trying to like uphold her duty. It just kind of shows just sort of how like just what's the right word? Sort of like separated from the whole situation she is. She ends up kind of going sort of in hiding during like the big climax of the story. And she doesn't even like really appear until like I think like near the end. But that's sort of a slight story for another day. But anyway, so Adol's about to go inside the dandelion, but Marius comes up and is like, hey, I remembered I was going to tell you something. I was going to tell you, and like he knocks Adol out and takes him back to the prison. So the next chapter is basically kind of like a giant attack on the prison. With Aprilis gone at this point, the gang decide to just go straight and sort of like, they want to kind of figure things out. Like, and Adol's recovered. They still don't really know what happened, but basically they go through another entrance and they get to Shadowlard, where they have like their big battle here. But here he reveals something that I almost got spoiled, but thankfully I was able to kind of save myself a little bit because it turns out that, for one thing, the reason why they have the primordial is that the primordial is a homunculus. It's artificially created. Not only that, the Crimson King, Adol Kristen, the character we've been playing as this entire game, is actually a homunculus created from the original Adol, and that prison Adol was the real Adol the entire time. And everyone's like, and it's kind of funny because the Crimson King, he kind of lowers his eyes and lowers his head. It's almost if he knew. It's almost if he knows that Shadowlard is speaking the truth, or he knew all along. Which, if he knew, that definitely kind of puts into perspective all the different choices where he's all like, I'm not Adol. It's like, because there were plenty of those. I'm just like, that's kind of funny. Where he's denying his existence, basically, but it's less that he's denying his existence and more that he's refuting something because he's not actually the real Adol. That may not be true, but I think it's kind of funny how it thinks that way. It was kind of funny. And he also reveals that this is where it gets a little kind of crazy, or where it starts to get kind of crazy, because not only is the Crimson King a homunculus, so is the entire party. Krisha, Credo, Jules, Yufa, even Anemona, they're all homunculus. Or Anemona, she's basically sort of like a larger homunculus-like version of one of Rosvita's favorite dolls, Saint Rosvita's favorite dolls, which explains why she has this attachment to her. But yeah, like, it turns out that Krisha and all of them are actually homunculi, based on Saint Rosvita's friends, her war friends. And they were created specifically to fight the Grimwald Nox. That's the reason why they were created, and they've actually been technically reborn like multiple times apparently, or they've been recreated a bunch of times. It also turns out that Aprilis was actually a homunculus of Saint Rosvita. Not only that, but she's actually still alive because there are plenty of bodies of her because she has that kind of thing going on. So, yeah, kind of crazy, and it's kind of funny. This one I kind of roleplayed a little bit because I actually haven't played Ys VIII yet, but I do know about the whole alchemy and Xandria thing. So when Shadow's like, do you know about alchemy at all? And you have a choice of saying yes or no, and I said yes, and Shadow's like, oh yeah, that's right, your time in Xandria. So, yeah, basically he tells you all this shit, and then you fight him. And he turns into a weird kind of monster-like form, which is strange. Because after you beat him, it turns out he is also a homunculus, and he's a homunculus of an old war hero during the 100 Years' War that also Saint Rosvita took part in. So, because there was like this big war that happened during the name of the continent they're actually on is called Glea. That's where Balduq is kind of taking place in, and Shadowlard wants to restore Galea's influence and power by making homunculi of very powerful people, both politically and just very powerful. And that's part of the reason why they made a homunculus of Adol. The homunculi of Krisha and all of them, that's kind of a separate ballgame in theory. But yeah, so that's kind of what they're going for. And it's here where the actual real antagonist makes his appearance. A character named Zola, who is this old alchemist friend of Saint Rosvita. He comes in and he's like, "Sup, dog? I am," and this is where they reveal who Anemona is with the whole doll thing. In fact, Anemona constantly makes reference to this character named she calls Papa, and she actually gets all of her memories back when she sees Zola. It's like, "Papa," and of course, he's the grand mastermind of the whole alchemy and homunculi thing. He used a lock of Saint Rosvita's hair to make the homunculus and stuff. But he's also not even done. Like, he's got this big, he calls it his magnum opus, which the appearance I got kind of spoiled on, but you know, it's definitely a very grand project, if you know what I mean. You'll see when I actually get to that part. But basically, during this time, Crimson King has another episode of like getting really weak and tired. And it turns out the reason why that's going on is that he's about to die. And the reason why he's about to die is because, unlike Krisha and all of them, to where they were homunculi made as children, so like they had full time to sort of like develop and stabilize their body, Crimson King was made using you know, the adult Adol. Like, he's 24 at this point or whatever. Like, he's in his 20s. So his body hasn't really had a lot of time to sort of like stabilize and kind of figure itself out. And so because of that, he's gonna die. And what they ultimately decide to do is do like this like soul merging thing, where they take the real Adol and Crimson King and put them together. And there's this cool cutscene where it shows the spirits of the Crimson King and Adol. And this is one of the few times to where we have sort of Adol legitimately talking with real dialogue. With the last few games, they would have like choices where like he would make like little grunts and noises and whatnot and say some small stuff during dialogue choices. But I remember particularly in 8 as well, where there'd be like choices to where like he would actually say like a full sentence because it's a cool moment. Here, the Crimson King actually has real legit dialogue and actually like legitimately talk. So it's kind of cool hearing sort of like Adol talk, you know, even if he's talking to himself and it's technically a separate character. But yeah, they come together, and you know, it's not really like a Liu Kang kind of thing from Mortal Kombat 11 to where like, or they make it seem like it's not really that, to where like the knowledge is also is combined, and it's not like he becomes like this godly thing or whatever. That'd be cool, but as far as the player's concerned, nothing really changes. Like, it's the regular Adol's body, but he still has to dye his hair and shit, and he has his Crimson King powers, and he has all his memories and stuff, so it's something. But yeah, we have our Adol now. And at this point, we're in the final chapter where they mainly are tying up loose ends. They're waiting for Aprilis to give them information because apparently a super Grimwald Nox is about to happen. And it's about to happen during this Glia Balduq festival, where apparently the enmity is so high that like the Grimwald is like super Grimwald. Like, it's messed up beyond belief. You know, messed up beyond belief. So, where it gets really bad. But here they're mainly tying up some loose ends. One of the ones that stands out is you go and you find Marius in sort of like the homunculi section of Balduq prison, because it turns out he's also a homunculus. How many fucking characters are a homunculus? But he's a homunculus of the current Roman emperor. So it really just kind of shows just how far along these characters have sort of gone. But he wants you to kill all the homunculi. And so he kills all of them, but then he also wants to die as well. It's a cutscene, but Adol and him do fight. And he's like, I want to die a warrior, and like he kills, Adol kills. I was about to say he kills Adol, which that would suck. But Adol kills Marius. He's all basically like, when you meet the real me, you'll maybe have an answer to why you like adventures and shit, which is kind of interesting. I'm not really sure what to make of that, but yeah. So and then there's like other little small things like Parks, the character Parks, who was Adol's prison buddy, who he was looking for Marius. But it also turns out that Parks was actually a part of the head of the Hieroglyph Knights. I think it's either this chapter or the chapter before where there's a subquest with Maxim to where you basically attack a Balduq prison, and it turns out that Maxim was actually like a high ranking member of like the King of Glia, and he's actually on like this personal mission to like find this heirloom or something. It was really interesting. Other thing, I think in this one, it was either this one or the one before where the character Sarati, turns out she actually likes to find treasure. You also once you actually get to the final dungeon, you have the ability to get like these blueprints for like this like blacksmith kid that you help out with his sister, and you can make the super weapons. And this one, instead of in Ys VIII, which where like you just upgrade your weapon, you can still upgrade the weapons, and you'll get a new weapon if you upgrade to a high enough. But you could also buy the weapons, and I kind of opted for that. This is kind of like a weird mix of like a traditional sort of action RPG with like the shops and whatnot, and gold and stuff. Getting gold actually isn't even really that hard. But then also like, you know, what Ys VIII kind of did with like the what do you call it? Equipment or the weapon upgrades, which is interesting. So this is sort of like a little loose end thing. Kratos, this one I was actually kind of looking forward to because Kratos ends up going crazy because we defeated Shadowlar, and he starts like going cuckoo, and they're not really sure how to get him out of his weird funk because he's in a weird state to where like he's trying to kind of avoid fighting or whatever, but also he's like cuckoo, and he actually is all like, yeah, I'm gonna leave the party because I'm weird. But Aprilis is all like, hey Adol, why don't you actually give him that duel he wanted? And I'm all like, oh yeah, here we go, man, here we go. You're gonna die, you're gonna fight, I'm gonna fight you, let's go, let's go, let's go. I actually said that, and that was pretty fun. He was piss-ass easy, and I even tried to let him hit me a few times, but it's funny, he was level 70-something, and I was level 70-something, and I was like a couple levels higher than him, but he still was just super easy. So, I kicked his anus, pretty literally. In fact, I have that in my notes. I say it was epic, and I kicked his anus. And you fight him actually twice, and like Aprilis does sort of like this character breakdown of all like, oh, you know, the real reason why you like fighting is because, and this is actually kind of interesting. Hawk is actually probably my favorite character besides Adol in this game. But it turns out the reason why he likes fighting so much is because it was the first time he realized there was something in his life that he wasn't actually inherently good at. So he liked the idea of kind of like working towards something and trying to figure things out and how to get better and have opponents who are better than him at something, and then he'll lose, and then he goes in and actually fights and like improves and stuff. So he likes kind of having like a rival and whatnot. And he wanted to fight Adol because, you know, Adol, yeah, as far as we know, he's not really, or as far as I know, because I haven't played all the Ys games, but as far as I know, he's not really trained. He just has a lot of like worldly experience. So that's kind of where a lot of his, he's traveled a lot and he's done a lot of stuff, and he's been like the chosen one. He's had powers and shit. So I have like 3 or 4 different games, like pretty much every game that he's in except for Origin, because he wasn't in that one. We still need to finish that one, but he has a lot of experience, and once he learned that like, oh, Adol's here, well, I gotta try this guy, and I'm gonna battle him and shit. And there's one part where like he's lying down, he's like, oh man, I lost, but he's actually smiling, and Approach is like, hey, you're smiling. He's like, I'm smiling. So yeah, that was kind of nice, and that's where, you know, we kind of learn more about Kratos here and all that. And then at this point, it's just like, you know, just little tiny side quests you can do, and you're trying to bring up your, you know, Super Grimwald. I forgot to mention this one little mouse character named Xavier, who's like this little rat guy. He's a Roo, which a Roo is basically like a little like weird rabbit-looking thing that was hanging out with Prison Adol and was his buddy. He ends up joining the party, you know, once, you know, both Adols merge, and he has a side quest where it turns out he was actually turned into a Roo, and he was actually a old war friend of Saint Rosvita, but instead of becoming a homunculus, he was turned into a Roo for one reason or another. I think it was through Zola. But you get like an accessory that's like part of his broken sword or something. It's pretty interesting. There are a lot of like little character moments. The characters in general I really like. Besides Krisha, I would say my wife, who's probably the character Silhouette, because she's cute. She's got her maid uniform and she wears a mask. And I think it's kind of cute how Yufa calls her Sil. Like, that's cute. This entire game is cute. And now then at this point, it's Super Grimwald time, where you do all your stuff and you get the next Grimwald ready. And Aprilis hasn't really called them, but they go to her grave area, and like the Lemuries are kind of popping out. Then it goes to the Super Grimwald, where it's like you're basically going through an entire battlefield, and you end up going to Balduq prison, but it's like an older version of it, to where it's Balduq Fortress. It's like an old version of it, and this is the final dungeon where you basically are going through. You're going through like these little like puzzle sections, and you have to fight like these giant sort of mechanical-looking armored guys who are like weird sort of, you know, homunculus versions of people that Zola and Saint Rosvita knew. But you eventually get to Zola, where, you know, he talks about his plan. He wants to use the homunculi, you know, to restore Glia. Basically what Shalar's trying to do. He wants to use, you know, the great minds of the past and stuff. And he sought out Adol because of his many adventures and his memories and how many different powerful people and things he met. That was kind of sort of the idea of why they got Adol, because, you know, they're also trying to get, you know, like these politically powerful and just generally powerful people that he and Shadowlord would capture. What basically Zola is trying to do here, using all of them plus Adol's memories, basically he was trying to create this super homunculus who's basically a god. And he shows it off, and he's doing this because he's trying to sort of let this creature, this being, take over for the Grimwald and break the curse so that they can just live their lives, and this thing will fight the Grimwald going forward. Its name is Atra. It basically looks like a godly angel version of Adol, and he does talk. And he's all like, okay, yeah, I don't... And he does like this like giant rain down move where he kills all the Lemuries. And he's like, okay, we don't need to anymore. But then he's all like, okay, we don't need Aprilis anymore. And he tries to kill Aprilis and the Monstrums. And Zola's like, well, bro, that's not really what I wanted. So Zola is trying to shut down his powers, but Atra kind of stops him. He's like, bruh. And then, of course, they do this whole thing. Even if we have to keep fighting, you know, we'll keep fighting and stuff. And, you know, kind of, it's low-key anime cheese, but yeah, he's the final boss and you get to fight him. He's not too tough, but he's too powerful, though, and the gang is getting tired. But it turns out Zola actually survived, and he pulled the switch to turn off his power. But then he turns into, like, this weird sort of, like, tower-like thing. It's almost kind of... It's actually a lot like the final boss of 7 and then 8 as well, where it's like this, like, little tower thing that you go up. Here, you don't switch characters. I don't think you switch characters in 8. I don't remember. But it's sort of like a thing where you go up, up, up. It wasn't really that tough. Like, there are parts where you have to, like, attack certain parts and break that stuff. Then it opens up, like, the main heart part that you need to destroy. So that was kind of interesting. And it was generally shorter, too. It didn't really take that long. I didn't even really grind or anything for it. The game in general wasn't really that hard, besides a couple Grimwalds, to where, like, I like they would destroy the Sphene before I had a chance to win. Or in one case of, like, the crystal ones, like, I would run out of time while I was trying to kill the giant boss. And in those situations, I would have to, like, grind a little bit and, like, upgrade my equipment and sort of, like, my defense against the Lemuries for this week. Because it's sort of like the raids in Ys VIII, where, like, you have, like, different things. You can charge at the Sphene itself, and then there's, like, these little glyph things that, like, lock and damage the monsters. And then, like, you have, like, little light pole things that, like, shoot beams or whatever. Like, you got little different things that, like, do shit to kind of help you win. And then, of course, you know, upgrade your equipment and grind and whatnot. It wasn't really that hard. And then after this, a bunch of souls, or like little orb things that are apparently of Adol's memories. One of them might be Donna. It's kind of hard to tell. They're female voices and male voices, and I can't really... I think what they were trying to do was be sort of like representations of Adol's memories of other people. It's hard to tell kind of who's who. I'm pretty sure one of them is Donna. One of them has to be like Lisa or somebody from Celceta, and then maybe the other Ys games. It actually would be kind of cool if there's some Ys VIII stuff in there, like Chester or Elena or whatever. But, and this one, like they ask, this is kind of a weird sort of like pseudo-choice thing. I don't know if the game, I haven't platinumed the game, I haven't gotten all the trophies, so I don't know if there are any alternate endings, but they make it seem like you have a choice. Like either you can destroy this thing and break the Monstrum curse, or you can kind of keep it going and let everyone else kind of like, you know, let everyone be free. Like you can either let the Grimwald continue or stop it. I ultimately chose what I felt like was to stop it. And then you basically just start slashing the thing, and like it finally breaks. It's like this giant egg thing, and it's kind of funny. Like when it happens, like both Yufa and Krisha voiced their opinion that they didn't really want it to end. Krisha in particular, she doesn't really want this to end because she's grown pretty fond of Adol. I kind of hinted at it a little bit earlier. Her affinity, her like best friend or whatever cutscenes where like she's sleeping, she's dreaming about Adol. It's like, what are you gonna do after you go? Like, don't leave me. I gotta pull myself together. Adol, you need to slap me. And you have a choice of either slapping her in the face or patting her on the head. And I chose to pat her on the head because, I mean, come on. I'm not gonna hit her. I'm not gonna hit her that hard. And also, she's my waifu. She and Syl are like my two waifus of this game. And she's all like, you dummy. But, yeah, she wants things to continue because she wants to kind of keep her friends around. Like, she doesn't want you to leave. And quite frankly, I didn't want to leave this world either. Or this story, rather. It was definitely kind of tough. But, yeah, so basically, I chose to destroy this little egg thing that it produces the enmity. And so basically, it kind of turns into a thing where, like, you know, monsters... It seems like the monsters aren't going to be produced anymore, but now it's going to be, like, you know, negative emotions are kind of, like, going to be more in flux. And I was like, oh, we're just going to have to deal with it. It's kind of like that. And it's what... I feel like the game almost made it seem like there was a choice, and I'd maybe have to play this section again and kind of like experiment a little bit, but it seemed like the game wanted you to have a choice, but in the end it wasn't really a choice at all from my perspective. But yeah, so with that, the Grimwald Nox curse is over, and then the epilogue is basically Adol and Dogi packing up and getting ready to say bye to everyone. And so you go through all your people and you talk to them. Silhouette actually shows up without her mask, which is nice, because she actually had the mask because it helped her see the Lumeris. Or she was able to see them, but she didn't like seeing them or something like. But she, for whatever reason, she stops wearing the mask and she looks hella cute. And here it kind of makes it seem like that, because Dogi and Krisha are talking when you see her, and they make it seem like that the homunculus characters, they got restored to regular bodies or whatever, but like it sounds like, because Krisha mentions like, oh, my memories are jumbled up. Like, well, wait, what do you mean? But this is definitely like best waifu scene material here, because she starts crying and being like, I don't want you to go, I don't want it to be over. And she says verbatim, can't you stay with me a little longer? And I'm like, bruh, I really wish I could. Like, I wanted to take Credo with me, because like there was a part where like his best friend scene, I'm only calling it that because I don't know what else to call it, after you give him the glasses, where, and he asks like, what are you going to do after this? And he's like, oh, I don't know. It's like, and Al's like, you want to come with me? And he's like, no. I'm like, bro, why does no one want to actually go? Like, I actually think that would be really cool if they take a character with them. Like, I don't know if they really want to do that, because right now the whole Adol Dogi thing is kind of good enough, I guess. But yeah, that scene with Krisha being like, can't you stay a little longer? I'm like, bruh. And of course Carla's like, bro, you gotta let him go. And then she's all like, okay, come back and visit. And I'm like, hell yeah, I will. If I was out, I'd be all like, hey, you wanna you want me to just stay here right now? I'm content being here. But of course, there's more adventuring to be had. And Parks, he gives you basically a parchment that lets you leave the jail, which is good because he's technically still a prisoner. And Jules and his dad, they get a lead on his disease, where they might try to find a cure. That was one of the loose ends as well. I think I forgot to mention that, to where like he and his dad kind of reconciled because he didn't really like his dad. But the reason why Jules' dad left was because he felt like working with Zola would help him find a cure for Jules. So that's the reason why he did it. So yeah, saying bye to everyone. Here, this is where it gets kind of interesting, I think, because Burger, he warns Adol that the Roman army are coming. Which, I think truthfully what they were trying to do was just sort of further give Adol a reason to leave, which doesn't really make a lot of sense because he's leaving anyway. But he also mentions like that there's a paranormal team coming by, and he mentions Ingrid, so I'm wondering if maybe Ys X might have to do with like ghosts or something. That would actually be interesting if it's more paranormal. And like Ys X is like the first horror game of the franchise. That'd be funny. But I think they're thinking about Ys X already, so I know I am. But Kratos, he doesn't show up at all during this until like the very end where you're waving bye to everyone. So as you're leaving, friggin' Aprilis shows up with her hood down, and they have like a little, she's like, thank you. And they talk about, she can kind of live for herself now. She's like, what am I going to do? Like, she can kind of do whatever she wants to do now. She doesn't have to really continue doing stuff anymore. She can kind of live for herself now, so she's kind of left with like a lot of options at this point. It's kind of unclear what she's going to do. And another thing that's kind of interesting too, while they're walking up, or while they're leaving, Dogi brings up two things. He brings up going to either Garmin or Britai. So I'm like, that's interesting. Makes me kind of wonder what they're planning. But then he also asks Adol, he's like, we've been to a lot of different places. You ever thinking about settling down? I chose, and this one, it said like, I don't know, maybe, or like, yeah, all the time. I chose yeah, all the time because I'm thinking like, in this situation, yeah, I am thinking like, I just kind of want to stay in Balduq. Like, Balduq, Felgana was okay. I kind of like the Celceta area, mainly just because that's still my favorite Ys game. Though this one's definitely up there for sure. Revisiting the Isle of Saren in one way or another would be kind of interesting. But yeah, so at that point, they walk off. And that's where the game ends. They show the credits. One thing that I also did get kind of spoiled of as well, because I actually looked up Geis in particular, but they show in the credits that Kratos joins up with Geis and his team, or it's implied that he shows up with Geis, or joins up with Geis and his team, because they show Geis in like the corner while Kratos getting drunk. They show Jules can walk. Yufa and Felix, they end up getting married. And Amona ends up getting her own like human body and helping out with the shop. Which they reveal that like the man and woman who owned the shop knew that she was sneaking out and that they were cool with it. So that's pretty cool. And I think they show Aprilis, but I don't remember. Though not that it really mattered. One thing I did kind of notice was that during the epilogue, the game doesn't complete the entire map of Balduq for you like it did in Ys VIII. Of course, in that situation, this was different to where like you weren't really specifically trying to explore the entire area to kind of figure things out. That was more of just like something that was just happening because of game, But after you save your clear data, the title screen changes from Aprilis looking all dark and sad to like this glowing sort of like golden sort of thing where like it shows like her gun and some other item. I think like her little like crystal thingy, lantern thing, kind of crisscross, sitting on top of like the little ledge thing that she was laying on or sitting on or whatever. And also it introduces like a boss time attack thing. That's kind of interesting. But yeah, other than that, not too much else. overall, I really like the game a lot. Like I said, the characters and the script were really interesting. The script was really well done, much better than in 8. And even then, like I thought 8 actually wasn't that bad, at least the rewrite. The voice acting was good. The music was good. Wasn't really as memorable as the other ones, though some of the tracks were good. I really liked the Coliseum area music. I liked that first field area. I also liked the Dandelion music and the town music, all of it that would play. It was nice and really relaxing and just nice music. I really like the verticality of the game and the dungeons and like all the platforming you can do. It made the game a lot more fun. Because again, I see the Ys series as sort of like a platforming action RPG to where like you're kind of expected to sort of jump around and like do those kind of puzzles. Mainly because of like Ys VI and then 3, or Ark and Apisham and then Oath and Felghana and then also Origin were real kind of like jumpy in those. And of course, you know, Ys VII and Memories of Celceta kind of changed it to sort of like just straight up action RPG. But then here with 8, they kind of brought in the jumping and whatnot, and then here they really refined it. So I'm looking forward to see what they do in Ys X, or if they end up doing an Ys V remake or something. Which if they do an Ys V remake, please, 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 Falcom, let them have the silver armor. If it's a remake of an older game, like let them have the armor. Because it's not like with Ys IV to where it kind of makes sense, because like, you know, chronologically that's like earlier in the timeline, so he wouldn't necessarily have his armor, whereas in 7, you know, he has his armor, and, you know, different things, you know. It's going to be kind of interesting to sort of, you know, explain why he loses his sword. It'd be kind of funny if, like, plot-wise, he actually never got the final weapon in the game. Like, he actually just happened to have, like, his, like, regular sword, and how it breaks or something. That'd be kind of funny, because, you know, obviously in Ys VIII, it takes place after 5, so he has the Ys V strongest sword, but then he loses it, and of course, you know, I haven't read it entirely yet, but included in the collector's edition of this game, there was a prologue that talks about how he loses his sword from Ys VII, because this one is the latest one in the timeline. It takes place after Ys VII, which that's all. I think that's actually kind of nice that we gotta get further along in the timeline. You know, I like that. I think Dogi looks a tad too old, but you know, he looks all right. You know, I thought the general character designs were good. You know, obviously, and it was nice. You know, seeing kind of the different landscapes, because even though it takes place mainly in like just one area or like one country, and in the city, there were different varied sort of areas. There wasn't really like a snow place, but there was like a sort of like there's a foresty place, a swampy place, I think, a deserty place, kind of, a mountain place, a volcano place, you know, so, and of course all the different dungeons, so like, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it was relatively varied, not entirely varied, but still nice. But yeah, I really enjoyed this game. Like this, I really got into the story more so than I was really expecting. I don't know if it was because I just went ahead and jumped into it instead of waiting like I did with Ys VIII, or what, but I really enjoyed the story, and I would actually really highly recommend it. I don't know where I put it in my Ys ranking, because I haven't played all the games yet. Memories of Celceta is still probably my favorite. I'd have to maybe replay it and kind of judge for myself, but I feel like with this series, with each new one that comes out, I kind of like it a little bit more than the previous one. But I really enjoyed the characters of Celceta, and I really enjoyed the characters here, so maybe in second place, I don't know. It's really hard to say, but I really enjoyed this game, and I would definitely recommend it if you want to get into the Ys series, because I feel like, especially if you want to play this one and then go back and play like, you know, Origin and Ark and Apisham and Oath and Felghana and stuff, especially if you're waiting for this to come out on PC and you're going to use this as like a gateway game for the PC version, you know, 8 as well. You know, this is a decent one because, like, yeah, it plays off of 8 a lot, but also because of the platforming and stuff and the verticality of the game, it kind of goes back to the older games a little bit. At least the ones before Ys VII. Like, in between the releases of Ys VI and Ys VII are the ones that kind of fall into this category. Like, if you're going to go back and play Ys 1 and 2, that's going to be kind of a different sort of ballgame entirely. Ys 5, as it is right now, if you try to play the played that one, either the PS2 remake or the Super Nintendo version, or Super Famicom rather, or whatever, it's going to be a little bit more like kind of what you're used to after playing this one, from what I can tell so far, because that's another one I haven't finished yet. I want to, because I'm actually really interested in that one. But yeah, honestly, this was a really good game. I really enjoyed it, and if you're looking for something to kind of tide you over for another big RPG, Tales of Arise, then this is a decent one to kind of play, to kind of tide you over while you're waiting for whatever your next big RPG is. Or if you just want to kind of try something different, if you like Legend, I keep comparing this series to Zelda and Kingdom Hearts, and it's like it's a little similar. I feel like this is slightly similar. Combat is definitely kind of more like Kingdom Hearts than Zelda, but I don't know. To me, they're a little similar. I'm probably going crazy. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Unfortunately, this is close to 2 hours long, so sorry about that. I'm going to have to kind of trim a little bit of it, so hopefully it'll be a little shorter, but, we'll see. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about the game. I enjoyed the story, the world a little bit, the characters, the platforming, the combat, the music. Only real low parts were that the whole homunculus thing got kind of old. I felt like the Balduq and the Grimwald Nox and the Balduq prison thing didn't really connect that well, besides the whole homunculus thing. And just like some small stuff, like it was a little disappointing that like your entire party didn't really seem to get that much benefit from the Grimwald Nox, even though they're all there. But I don't know, maybe I'm actually wrong about that, and like I'll be playing the game, because I just stuck with Adol, Krisha, and Kratos. I didn't like switch up my party unless the game wanted me to. So like I don't know, maybe I'll be playing the game and then like Yufa will suddenly get a level up when she's not even in my party. I don't know. I'll have to see kind of how the gameplay goes, but I think I've rambled enough about this game. Overall, good game, great game if you ask me, and if you're interested in trying it, maybe be on the lookout for it. You might like it. So yeah, this is Flames Are On, aka YouTube Tasuke, signing out. See you later. Well, I guess I should probably give this game a rating as well, since I kind of forgot. But yeah, I would probably give this game a 9 out of 10, I think. It was pretty good. Okay, bye now.